Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I bought my house back in 2020 in this small four-house development. Newly built, good price, quiet street. The only problem was we had to have a homeowners association. I knew it could be trouble, but it seemed harmless enough at the time. We had this little park at the back that needed maintenance, and that was basically why the association existed. The park was just an overgrown floodplain behind the last house. County said it was worth about $3,000, which tells you how useless it was. But it was community property, so someone had to take care of it. For the first couple years, we all just paid our dues and let things run. $280 a month per house. Not awful, but not great either. Most of that money went to a maintenance company that mowed the park and this tiny strip of grass that was on my property but counted as common area for some weird reason. Then last year, the family living closest to the park came to us with an idea. They wanted to take over the whole park area and turn it into their backyard. I thought they were nuts at first, but they had actually planned it out. They would buy the park from the association for the assessed value, handle all the maintenance themselves, and we would use the money to finally fill our emergency fund. We had been trying to build that fund up for years. They even got a lawyer to write up a deed that gave us permanent access and said if they ever moved, we could buy it back. We all met up one weekend to talk it over. 4 households squeezed into my living room, passing around paperwork and doing math on our phones. My neighbor from 2 doors down asked if we were really just handing over community property. The guy making the offer explained we would sell it for what it was worth and get rid of our biggest expense. He reminded everyone we would still have access. My wife whispered to me that it made sense and we would save a ton of money. The other neighbor, this older guy who worked from home, said he was in. He added that he hated paying for that swamp anyway. We voted right there. Everyone said yes. The family got their yard, we got our emergency fund filled, and our costs were about to drop. But then we needed the new president for the association. Nobody ever wants to do it. It takes up your time for zero benefit. We usually just took turns with whoever got stuck with it. This time everyone looked at me. My wife said it was kind of my turn. I asked if she was serious. The other neighbor said I should do it because everyone else had already served. I agreed because I knew we would be there all night if I argued. But once I started looking at the books and rules, I noticed something. Without the park, we barely had any community property. Just that dumb little grass strip by my driveway. The maintenance company had a minimum fee just to show up, even though the work took 10 minutes. I realized I could mow that strip when I did my own lawn. I had a riding mower already. It would add maybe a minute. So I fired the maintenance company. My neighbors thought I was being cheap, but I showed them the numbers. Without that contract, our only expense was insurance for common area. And what common area? A strip of grass? Then I saw something else. Our association charter was up for renewal at the end of the year. By law, we had to renew it, or it would just dissolve. I called an emergency meeting. I told everyone to hear me out and asked what if we just didn't renew. The skeptical neighbor asked what would happen to the emergency fund. I said we would keep it. We could put it in a third-party account and split it 4 ways if anyone needed it, or just leave it for emergencies. My wife asked if that was legal. I said I checked with a lawyer, and it was completely legal. The fund wasn't part of the association, it was just our money. The older neighbor started laughing. He asked if I was saying we could just kill the whole thing. I said that was exactly what I meant. No more dues, no more meetings, no more electing presidents. Nobody wanted to be. It took about 15 minutes before everyone agreed. We voted to let the charter expire, filed the paperwork, moved our emergency fund to a shared account at a credit union where we all had access. Just like that, we went from $280 a month to zero. The day it became official, I texted everyone saying the association was dead and we could have ugly lawn ornaments if we wanted. My wife brought home champagne that night. We sat on our back deck looking out at our neighbor's new yard where the park used to be. She said she couldn't believe I pulled it off. I joked that it was my best presidential term ever because I abolished the government. We still see each other around the neighborhood, still friendly, still have that emergency fund sitting there just in case. But no more fees, no more meetings, no more arguing about mailbox colors. Just 4 houses, 4 families, and zero homeowners association. I have twin daughters who are 14 and freshmen in high school. When they were little, they were inseparable. Everywhere one went, the other followed. Same classes, same friends, same everything. The teachers loved having them together. Other parents would comment on how close they were. But somewhere around 6th grade, one of my daughters started pulling away from her sister. The thing is, when they were together, one of them was always kind of in charge. She made the decisions, picked the games, chose which friends they'd hang out with. The other one just went along with it. I didn't really notice it at first because they seemed happy enough. But then middle school hit and suddenly my more dominant daughter was miserable. She came to me one night in 7th grade crying. She opened up about feeling like she couldn't breathe, like she was always stuck being half of something instead of her own person. That hit me hard. I talked to the school and we started trying to separate them more. Different classes when we could manage it, though that was tough because the school wasn't huge. I made sure they had their own activities too. One got really into sports, the other loved theater. We started doing separate birthday parties instead of one big shared one. Little things like that. And one of my girls absolutely bloomed. She made her own friends, found her own interests, became her own person. But the other one struggled. Without her sister leading the way, she seemed lost. High school was supposed to be a fresh start for both of them. Completely different schedules, no shared classes at all. For the first few weeks, everything seemed okay. They were both making friends, settling in, doing their own thing. Then, about a month ago, things went sideways. My daughter, who was already struggling, had been hanging out with this group of girls. I met them a few times, they seemed nice enough, but apparently there was some drama with a boy, and the whole friend group imploded. High school stuff, you know, but it left my daughter completely alone. She started sitting by herself at lunch every day. I'd pick her up from school and she'd be quiet, withdrawn. Finally, she told me what was happening and asked if she could sit with her sister and her sister's friends at lunch. I thought it would be fine. They're twins, right? They're supposed to have each other's backs. But when she asked her sister, the answer was a hard no. The fight that followed was ugly. My daughter, who said no, explained that these were her friends, that her sister needed to learn to make her own friends and stop piggybacking off her. She went on about how she'd spent years trying to be her own person, and she wasn't going back to being a package deal. My other daughter was sobbing, saying that they were twins and sisters and she shouldn't have to sit alone when her sister had a whole table of friends right there. She kept saying it wasn't fair. They both came to me expecting me to fix it. My ex was calling me nonstop telling me I needed to make one of them sit with the other, saying it was cruel to let her sit alone. But here's the thing that nobody seems to get. I sat down with my daughter who was sitting alone. I was gentle about it. I really was. I told her that her sister didn't have to sit with her at lunch, that these were her sister's friends, not hers. I encouraged her to keep putting herself out there, to join some clubs, to talk to people in her classes. I even suggested she talk to her school counselor about making friends. She's been crying ever since. Barely talking to me, barely talking to her sister. My ex is absolutely furious with me. He keeps calling and going off about how I'm playing favorites, how I'm being cruel, asking what kind of mother lets one kid sit alone while the other has friends. But here's what he doesn't understand, what nobody seems to understand. For years, one of my daughters was suffocating. She was never just herself, always half of a matched set. And now that she finally has her own identity, her own friends, her own life, everyone expects her to give that up because her sister is struggling. Is that fair to her? Is it fair to force her to go backwards just because her sister hasn't figured out how to move forward yet? My daughter, who's thriving, she's in clubs, she has her sports, she's finally happy. My other daughter is also in clubs and theater, She talks to a counselor at school who basically gave her the same advice I did to put herself out there. She has opportunities to make friends. It's just harder for her. I know it sounds cold. I know it probably makes me a terrible mother in some people's eyes, but I can't force them to sit together. That would just create resentment. My daughter, who finally found herself, would end up hating her sister for dragging her back into that twin package deal. And honestly, that package deal is exactly why they're not close now. Everyone always treated them as one unit, never as two separate people, and one of them was drowning in that. So no, I'm not going to force her to give up the independence she fought so hard for. Maybe I'll suggest she sits with her sister once in a while. Not every day, but sometimes. That seems reasonable, but I'm not guilt-tripping either of them. One of them is allowed to say no to sitting with someone, even if that someone is her twin sister. I just hope I made the right call. Because right now, with one daughter crying in her room and my ex yelling at me over the phone, it sure doesn't feel like it. I'm a junior at Lincoln High, and I keep my head down most of the time. I'm not the type to get involved in drama or start problems with anyone. I just show up, do my work, and mind my business. The whole thing started because of a group project in history class last month. Our teacher paired me up with this girl who I'll call Karen Jr. because the apple didn't fall far from that tree. We had to work on a presentation about the Cold War, and right from the start, she barely contributed anything. I tried being nice about it, sending her reminders about deadlines, offering to split the work evenly, but she kept blowing me off. She'd read my messages and not respond, or send back one-word answers like she couldn't be bothered. I even offered to meet up at the library after school to work on it together, but she always had some excuse. Cheerleading practice, hanging out with friends, getting her nails done, whatever. 2 days before the presentation was due, she still hadn't done her part. I sent her a final message asking if she was going to contribute anything at all. She told me to chill out and that she'd get to it eventually. Eventually never came. I ended up doing the entire thing myself, staying up until 2 in the morning the night before to finish it. I wasn't about to present half a project and tank my grade because she couldn't be bothered to do her share. The next day I went to our teacher before class and explained the situation. I showed him all the messages I'd sent her, all the read receipts, all the excuses. He looked over everything and told me he appreciated me being honest with him. When it came time to present, I did the whole thing myself. She sat there looking bored, not even pretending like she'd contributed. The teacher gave me full credit and docked her severely. She failed that assignment completely, getting a 0 for her portion. That 0 pushed her grade down from a B- to a D, which was below the requirement to stay on the cheerleading squad. The school has a rule that you need to maintain at least a C average in all your classes to participate in extracurricular activities. She got kicked off the squad 2 days later. From that day on, she made it her mission to make my life hell. It started with the typical petty stuff. She'd spread rumors about me in the hallways, telling people I was a snitch and a try-hard who couldn't work with others. She'd give me dirty looks whenever we passed each other, making sure I knew she blamed me for everything. Her friends would shoulder check me between classes, knock my books out of my hands, that kind of thing. I ignored all of it. I've dealt with worse, and I wasn't about to let some entitled brat get under my skin. But then things escalated over the next few weeks. She started following me around school, making comments just loud enough for me to hear. Stuff about how I was a snitch, how I ruined her life, how she was going to make me regret it. Her friends would laugh, and I'd just keep walking. She'd wait outside my classrooms and stare at me when I came out. She'd sit near me in the cafeteria and make loud comments about people who couldn't mind their own business. I thought about reporting it to a teacher or the principal, but I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. It's not like she was physically threatening me or putting her hands on me, just being a bully, and the school doesn't do much about that unless it gets really bad. Until that one day, I was heading to my next class on the 3rd floor around 1:15 in the afternoon. The stairwell is always crowded between periods, with everyone trying to get where they need to go. I was about halfway up when I noticed her behind me. She was with 2 of her friends, and they were all laughing about something. I didn't think much of it at first. I'd seen her around school plenty of times since the whole project thing, and usually she just glared or made a comment. But then the crowd thinned out when people peeled off to different floors. By the time I reached the landing between the second and third floor, it was just me, her, and her two friends. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt wrong about the situation. I heard footsteps getting closer behind me, faster than normal walking pace. I looked back and saw her rushing toward me, arms outstretched like she was going to shove me. Everything happened in slow motion and super fast at the same time. She was going for my back, clearly trying to push me down the stairs. I jerked to the side at the last second, pressing myself against the wall and grabbing the railing. She went flying past me, completely off balance from the momentum of running at me. Her arms windmilled when she tried to catch herself, but there was nothing to grab onto. She tumbled down the entire flight of stairs, bouncing off the steps with these sickening thuds. I heard her hit each step, her body making horrible cracking sounds. Her friends started screaming at the top of their lungs. I just stood there, frozen, watching her, crumpled at the bottom of the stairs in a heap. She was crying and wailing, clutching her arm which was bent at a weird angle. Her leg was twisted under her in a way that definitely wasn't normal. Other students came running from both directions when they heard the screaming. Within minutes, teachers and the school nurse were rushing to the scene. The nurse told everyone to back up and give her space while she checked on Karen Jr. She was moaning in pain and I could see her wrist was swelling up fast. They called an ambulance while I tried to explain what happened to one of the teachers. I was shaking and trying to get the words out, telling them she tried to push me and I moved out of the way. But her friends were already lying, talking over me and saying I pushed her. They said I'd been bullying her for weeks and finally attacked her on the stairs, that I shoved her down on purpose because I was jealous of her. I was panicking, trying to tell my side, but nobody seemed to be listening to me over the chaos. One teacher took me by the arm and walked me to the principal's office, while another stayed with Karen Jr. The ambulance showed up about 10 minutes later. I could hear the sirens from where I was sitting in the office. They took her out on a stretcher, still crying with her arm in some kind of temporary brace. My life was over. It was my word against three of theirs, and I was the one standing at the top of the stairs while she was being loaded into an ambulance with obvious injuries. The principal asked me to explain what happened, and I told him everything. About the project, about her harassing me for weeks, about her running at me on the stairs. He wrote it all down but didn't say much, just told me to wait while they figured things out. I sat in that office for almost an hour, feeling sick to my stomach. Then her mother showed up. I heard her before I saw her, screaming in the hallway outside the main office. Karen stormed in like a hurricane, her face already red and twisted up. She was yelling about how I tried to murder her precious daughter. She was demanding I be arrested, expelled, sued, everything she could think of. The principal tried to calm her down and get her to sit, but she wasn't having it. She kept screeching about how her daughter was an innocent victim and I was a violent criminal who belonged in jail. Karen went on and on about how her daughter could have died from a fall like that, how I was a little psychopath who tried to kill her over some stupid school project. She said her daughter had a broken arm, a broken wrist, and a fractured ankle from the fall. She wanted the police there immediately and said she was pressing charges for assault, attempted murder, and anything else her lawyer could come up with. The principal told her they were still investigating what happened and needed to review all the evidence before making any decisions. Karen wasn't having it at all. She asked what more evidence they needed when her daughter was in the hospital with broken bones. She demanded I be arrested right then and there and removed from the school. She said she'd sue the school for millions of dollars if they didn't expel me immediately. I sat there shaking, tears running down my face, while this woman screamed about ruining my life. She kept pointing at me and calling me names, saying I was dangerous and didn't belong around other kids. My parents showed up about 20 minutes later after the school called them. My mom took one look at Karen yelling and looked ready to throw hands. My dad put his hand on her shoulder to keep her calm while they asked what was going on. The principal explained the situation and said they were pulling the security footage from the stairwell. Karen said she didn't care about any footage, that her daughter's injuries were proof enough of what I did. My mom told her to shut up and wait for the evidence like everyone else. That set Karen off even more, and she started yelling about how my parents raised a monster. The principal had to threaten to call security to get her to calm down even a little bit. It took them 3 hours to pull up the footage from the stairwell camera. 3 hours of sitting in that office listening to Karen rant about what a terrible person I was. She went on and on about how she was going to sue my family for everything we had. How I'd never get into college with an assault charge on my record. How she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was. My parents tried to tune her out, but it was impossible in that small office. The principal kept having to tell her to lower her voice when she got too loud. Finally, the IT guy came in with a laptop and said he had the footage ready. When they played it, the room went dead silent. You could see everything clear when day on the screen. The timestamp showed 1:16 p.m. in the corner. The camera caught me walking up the stairs with other students around. Then it showed the crowd thinning out when people went to their classes. You could see her and her friends hanging back, waiting for the stairs to clear. Then her rushing toward me from behind, arms out, clearly trying to shove me. Me jerking to the side and grabbing the railing. Her flying past me and tumbling down the entire flight. Her friends just standing there watching, not even trying to help. No contact between us whatsoever. The principal replayed it twice to make sure everyone saw it clearly. You could even see her friends looking at each other before they started screaming, like they were deciding what to say. The principal paused the video and turned to Karen. He told her that her daughter very clearly attempted to assault another student, that the footage showed premeditation, with her waiting for the stairwell to clear before attacking. He said her daughter was being expelled effective immediately for attempting to cause serious bodily harm to another student. He suggested that if she chose to pursue legal action, she should direct it at the appropriate party, meaning her own daughter. Karen's face went through about 5 different shades of red and purple. She tried to argue that the video must be wrong somehow, that it didn't show everything. My dad asked her if she was seriously trying to deny what we all just watched with our own eyes. She sputtered for a minute, opening and closing her mouth like a fish. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, still yelling about lawyers and lawsuits. But this time the threats were directed at the school for having dangerous stairs or something equally stupid. The principal apologized to me and my parents for what we'd been through. He said the school would be pursuing their own charges against Karen Jr. for the assault attempt. The police showed up about 30 minutes later to take statements, not to arrest me like Karen wanted, but to investigate her daughter's assault attempt. I gave my statement, they reviewed the footage, and wrote everything down. They said they'd be in touch if they needed anything else. Her 2 friends got called into the office the next day. The police interviewed them separately and they caved pretty quickly. When they realized lying to the cops was a felony, they admitted Karen Jr. had planned it. She told them she was going to push me down the stairs to teach me a lesson. They thought she was joking until she actually did it. Now they were facing potential charges as accessories for not reporting it. She got expelled that Friday. The school sent out an email to all the parents explaining that a student had been expelled for attempting to assault another student. They didn't name her, but word spread fast in a school like ours. I heard Karen tried to enroll her daughter at 3 different schools in the area, but word got around about what happened and why she was expelled. Nobody wants a student with an assault record and a history of premeditated violence. The last I heard, they were looking at private schools an hour away that cost something like $15,000 a year. I also heard that the school district was considering pressing criminal charges against her. Assault on school property is taken seriously, and the fact that it was premeditated made it worse. My parents talked to a lawyer about getting a restraining order, but we decided to wait and see if she stayed away. So far, I haven't seen her or her mom since that day in the principal's office. I still take the elevator now instead of the stairs, even though it takes longer, just in case. I've dealt with vasovagal reactions my whole life. Blood outside my body doesn't bother me. I can handle a nosebleed, patch up a cut, whatever. But the second someone sticks a needle in me to draw blood, my body decides to stage a full revolt. Everything goes sideways. The room spins like I'm on a carnival ride. Nausea hits like a freight train, and I'm suddenly questioning every life choice that led me to that moment. So there I was in 2018, 43 years old, and facing hernia surgery the next day. But before they'd let me go under the knife, I needed blood work done. Standard procedure, they said. No big deal, they said. Except it was a very big deal for someone like me. I walked into the lab that morning knowing exactly what I needed to make this work. I'd been through this rodeo enough times to have a system, lie down flat, get an extra alcohol wipe to smell when things start going south, and usually I can get through it without incident. Simple accommodations that make the difference between a smooth blood draw and a complete disaster. The phlebotomist called me back, and I immediately explained the situation. I wasn't trying to be difficult or demanding. I just needed her to understand that this wasn't me being squeamish or dramatic. This was a legitimate medical issue that required a couple of minor adjustments. Her response still amazes me when I think about it. She told me flat out that they didn't have a place for me to lie down and she couldn't spare any wipes. Just like that. No attempt to problem solve, no offer to find an alternative solution. Just a flat refusal was the kind of tone that suggested I was inconveniencing her by having a medical condition she'd probably learned about in her training. I looked around the room. There wasn't a bed or a reclining chair, just a regular chair at the table. Not ideal, but I'd already taken time off work for this appointment, and the surgery was scheduled for the next morning. The blood work was mandatory. I couldn't just reschedule and hope for a more accommodating phlebotomist next time. So I decided to tough it out. How bad could it be? Right? I'd try to power through and hopefully get out of there before my body completely betrayed me. I sat down at the table and she prepped my arm. The needle went in and she started drawing. They needed 5 vials, 5 separate tubes of blood for whatever battery of tests they were running. I swear they could have stocked a blood bank with what they were taking. At first, I was managing okay. I could feel that familiar sensation creeping in, the slight dizziness, the clamminess spreading across my skin, but I was holding it together. I focused on breathing, on staying present, on not thinking about the fact that my blood was currently leaving my body through a needle. Then the flow stopped. She looked at the vial with this confused expression, like she couldn't figure out why the blood wasn't cooperating. I could feel the tourniquet still tight around my upper arm, cutting off circulation. It seemed pretty obvious to me what the problem was. I pointed out to her as gently as I could that the tourniquet was still on. I said it trying to be helpful. Maybe she'd just forgotten in the middle of the draw. It happens. People make mistakes. She looked at me with complete confidence and told me the most baffling thing I'd heard in a medical setting. She insisted that it was supposed to stay on. I was already struggling at this point, already fighting to keep myself from sliding into full vasovagal response territory, and now I had to process this moment of stunning incompetence. The tourniquet is supposed to come off after they get the needle in. That's basic procedure. Everyone knows this. But before I could even formulate a response, before I could politely suggest that maybe she'd double-check her technique, she did something that sealed both our fates. Instead of removing the tourniquet like any competent phlebotomist would do, she reached across the table and wiggled the needle that was currently stuck in my vein. She moved it around, trying to get the blood to flow again while it was still inside my arm. That was it. That was the point of no return. Every ounce of willpower I'd been using to hold myself together evaporated in that instant. The room started spinning for real. The nausea went from manageable to catastrophic in about half a second. I was on the struggle bus, then I was driving the struggle bus, and then the struggle bus crashed into a wall at full speed. I should mention that I hadn't needed to fast for this blood work. So on my way to the appointment, I stopped at the restaurant and treated myself to a massive breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, sausage, hash browns, toast, and about 3 cups of coffee. It was a feast. I'd figured I might as well enjoy a good meal before surgery put me on restricted eating for a while. That entire breakfast made a sudden and violent reappearance. I projectile vomited all over her, and I mean all over. It was like someone had opened a fire hose of partially digested diner food and aimed it directly at her torso. Pancakes, eggs, sausage, and coffee exploded from me was the force of a broken water main. She was covered head to chest in what looked like something from a biohazard training video. If you're old enough to remember that show on Nickelodeon where they dumped green slime on people, it looked exactly like that, except the slime had gone very, very bad. She jumped back with this look of absolute horror on her face, but the damage was done. She was wearing my breakfast like a disgusting poncho. I didn't feel bad. Not even a little bit. She'd had multiple warnings. I told her upfront about my condition. I explained what I needed. She refused to provide basic accommodations that would have prevented this entire situation. Then she left the tourniquet on when it should have come off. Then, in the final catastrophic failure of judgment, she wiggled a sharp object inside a patient's arm. Every single step of this disaster was preventable. Every single one. She had to call someone else to come in and deal with the biohazard situation while the needle was still sticking out of my arm. Another staff member came in, carefully removed it, bandaged me up, and let me rest for a bit while they presumably hosed down their colleague in another room. After about 15 minutes, I felt completely fine. The vasovagal response had passed, I gotten the vomiting out of my system, and I was ready to go home and prep for surgery the next day. I walked out of that lab feeling utterly unbothered by what had just happened. Zero guilt, zero regret. The surgery went fine, by the way, and I bet money that phlebotomist started listening when patients told her about their medical conditions after that day. Back in the early 70s, I worked for a small fabrication shop where I did just about everything. Billing, accounts receivable, you name it. We had a machine shop attached to the facility, and that's where all the trouble started. We landed the contract with this big company that made specialty truck products. They needed custom parts from us, which meant our machine shop had to create the dies first, then we'd fabricate the pieces. Sounded straightforward enough? It wasn't. These people changed their specifications constantly. Every couple of weeks, they wanted something different. A measurement adjusted here, a modification there. Our contract spelled it out clearly. Any changes they requested meant they had to pay for the increased costs. We're talking small amounts here. Most change orders added somewhere between 2 and 5 cents per part. The routine became predictable. They'd call asking for a change. We'd run the numbers and tell them the part that cost 35 cents would now be 38 cents. They'd agree, we'd make new dies, produce the parts, and ship them out. Then their accounting would reject the invoice. Every single time the same response came back. The contract says 35 cents per part, not 38 cents. I'd get on the phone and explain it all over again. I'd point out they had requested the change 2 weeks earlier. We had told them the new price. They had approved it. They'd insist the contract stated 35 cents per part. I'd remind them that price was for the original specification, and when they changed the specification, the price changed too, just like the contract allowed. They'd repeat they were only paying the contracted price. This went on for months. They'd approve changes verbally, we'd complete the work, then they'd refuse to pay the difference. The amounts were tiny, but they added up. More than that, it was the principle. They were essentially stealing our labor and materials. I finally reached my limit. I walked into the plant manager's office and told him to stop production on any parts where they weren't paying the correct price. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. He said we'd lose the contract. I told him we were already losing money on every part we made for them, so what difference did it make? Here's the thing about this company. They ran on a just-in-time inventory system, very modern for the 70s. They kept almost nothing in stock, counting on deliveries to arrive exactly when needed. No backup warehouse full of spare parts. So when we stopped shipping, they had nothing. 3 days passed before my phone started ringing nonstop. They were panicking about where their parts were. They had trucks sitting on the assembly line going nowhere. I told them calmly we weren't shipping until they paid what they owed. They said it was ridiculous and started quoting the contract at me. I cut them off. The contract said they had to pay for change orders. They had approved those change orders. They weren't paying for them. No payment meant no parts. They threatened to sue. They said they'd take their business elsewhere. I told them that was fine, but they still owed us money for the work already completed. We kept going back and forth for days. Meanwhile, their entire production line sat idle. Workers standing around with nothing to do. Trucks half assembled. Management having a complete meltdown. On day 5, a courier showed up at our door with a check. Full payment for every outstanding invoice. Every disputed cent accounted for. Along with the check came approval forms for all pending change orders, properly signed and dated. The plant manager came into my office with a huge grin on his face. He told me their downtime had cost them several $100,000 for that week. I asked him what our total billing was for all the disputed amounts. He said around $250. We both started laughing. They'd hemorrhaged hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rather than pay us an extra $250 they legitimately owed. The math made no sense, but that's corporate accounting departments for you. Things ran smoothly after that. They paid on time, they approved change orders properly, we shipped parts on schedule. But when contract renewal time came around, they decided to take their business to another machine shop. We didn't mind. The headaches hadn't been worth it anyway. Then they called with one final request. They needed the tools and dies we had made for their parts. Here's what they didn't understand. We'd invested serious money creating those custom dies. They were our property unless the contract said otherwise. And it didn't. I told them we could sell the dies to them. They seemed stunned. They said they were the client and we should just hand them over. I explained those dies had cost us thousands of dollars to manufacture. If they wanted them, they needed to buy them. I gave them a fair price, probably more fair than they deserved. They balked immediately, called it highway robbery, said they'd just have the new shop make new ones. I shrugged and told them that was their choice. 2 weeks went by before my phone rang again. They wanted to talk about those dies. Turns out the new shop had quoted them even more than our price to create new dies from scratch. Plus they'd have setup time, testing, production delays. They needed our dies and they needed them immediately. I gave them the same price as before. They called it outrageous. I told them to take it or leave it. They tried negotiating. I didn't budge an inch. Eventually they agreed but wanted to pay in 30 days like a regular invoice. I said absolutely not. Payment upfront. Certified check. Only then would we ship. They completely lost it. Said we were being unreasonable. I reminded them about the $250 lesson they'd learned a few months back. They went quiet. The check arrived the next morning. We shipped the dies that afternoon. About 6 months later, they were pulling the exact same routine with the new shop, approving changes, then refusing to pay the price difference. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.